A year ago, JoAnn closed, and we were all trying to figure out the same thing. Where do we buy fabric now? I actually made a whole video breaking down the options at the time, but now it's been a year, and I have a real answer because I've actually been living it. And honestly, where I shop is probably not what you'd expect. Some you might not agree with. And there are a few places people talk about a lot, or that we had high hopes for, that I just don't use. And I'll explain why. So let's get into it. Hi, I'm Victoria, and I help you sew practical, stylish accessories that are ready for real life and real adventures. Now, real quick, before we get into the ones you're probably wondering about, this isn't a complete list of every place you can buy fabric. I've already put together a full series breaking down a lot of the options, including my original Where to Buy Fabric After JoAnn's video, plus a more in-depth look at in-store and online options. So if you want more ideas, I'll link that below. This is more of a real-life update. What held up for me, what didn't, and where I actually shop now. Oh, and I do have a fabric resource for you related to all of this, which I will share at the end. Now, I've broken this video down into 3 categories. First, let's start with the ones that people keep talking about, but aren't actually where I shop. The first one you're probably wondering about is Michaels. After JoAnn's closed, Michaels actually acquired a lot of their inventory, their IP, and other brand assets with the goal of expanding into fabric, sewing supplies, and even sewing machines. So naturally, a lot of us thought, okay, this might be the new go-to. And it still could be, but I haven't really seen that yet. In my store and another one I visited, they've definitely expanded. There are now bolts of fabric instead of just a few fat quarters and a slightly bigger sewing section. But it's basically one aisle, or really just one side of an aisle. I haven't seen sewing machines and the overall fabric selection is still pretty limited. But let me know if you're seeing something different. Given that, it still feels like a general craft store, not really a true fabric destination. And this is just my personal take, but the fabric kind of sits in that middle range where it's not super cheap, but it's not really high-end either. And for the way I sew, the middle ground just doesn't really serve me. I'm either going budget or I'm going for something more premium. So right now, Michaels just isn't somewhere I go for fabric. Next up is Hobby Lobby. And compared to Michaels, they definitely have a wider selection. There's more variety: lace, fleece, novelty fabric, and trims, and usually a full section of the store dedicated to fabric. So it's definitely a step up from what I'm seeing at Michaels. But for me, it mostly comes down to how I shop for fabric now. I already have a pretty large stash of fabric, so when I'm buying fabric, it's usually for something specific, not just browsing or catching a sale. And because of that, Hobby Lobby doesn't really work for me either. As I mentioned, I'm usually going budget or straight to something higher quality. And there's a specific store that I go to for that, which I'll talk about in the next section. And so while it does have a better selection than Michaels, it's just not somewhere I usually end up shopping. Next is Spoonflower. And this one's a little different because it's not that it's a bad option, it just doesn't really fit the way I shop. For me, it falls more on the expensive side, and if I'm going to spend that much, I'm usually going to go with my go-to premium option that has a wider selection for what I'm looking for. And a lot of what I've seen there just doesn't usually match my personal style. That said, I would absolutely use Spoonflower for printing my own designs, but for browsing, it's just not something I personally use. Next is Etsy, and a lot of you mentioned Etsy on my last video. So I looked at it, and there are definitely some beautiful fabrics on there. But for me, it mostly comes down to consistency. Because you're buying from individual sellers, there's just a lot of variation in things like quality, pricing, photos, and overall experience. And for the way I shop, that carries a little bit too much uncertainty and decision fatigue. I usually want to know exactly what I'm getting and exactly what to expect. And with Etsy, that can take a lot more time and research. So while there are absolutely great options on there, it can just take a lot more digging than I personally want to do. Now here's where I actually shop these days. First, and probably the biggest one, is Mood Fabrics. I love this store. They do have a few physical locations: New York City, LA, and Miami. And if you ever get the chance to go in person, it honestly feels like a fabric wonderland. So fun. There's just an incredible range of fabric, trims, notions, basically everything. And while they're known for fashion fabrics, they really do have a wide range. You can find everything from specialty fabrics to quilting cottons, which is what I use a lot for my projects. But for most of us, this is really an online store, and I know that can make a lot of people a little hesitant with fabric. But Mood is actually really good at online shopping. Their photos are detailed, They show texture, drape, thickness, and sometimes even a video, so you can get a much better sense of the fabric than you might expect. They also have a huge selection, and you can order by the half yard, which makes it much more flexible. And if you're trying to color match, you can order swatches ahead of time. This is a true fabric store, not just a craft store with a fabric section, and that has its advantages. So overall, it's just a really strong option when you want something specific or higher quality. Most of the time, I'm going to go more budget. But when I need something very specific or want a certain look or quality, this is where I go. Like recently, I needed faux leather vinyl and a thicker clear vinyl for a project I'm working on. And I just knew I wasn't going to find it in the budget options. And that's exactly where Mood Fabrics really stands out. You can find things there that are just harder to get elsewhere. So this is definitely one of my main go-to stores. I love it. Next is Walmart. And I know this one might surprise you, but hear me out. The biggest reason I go there is just price. It's one of the most budget-friendly options, and a lot of the time, that's exactly what I need. They've moved away from bolts and mostly do pre-cuts now, but you can still get things like fat quarters and small cuts for just a few dollars, which is really hard to beat. And for the kind of projects I make, that actually works really well. I'm usually sewing accessories, not garments. So my fabric doesn't need to stretch, hold up to constant washing, or handle the same level of wear. Plus, a lot of my projects only need a small piece of fabric, like a chapstick holder, which only requires a 6-inch by 12-inch piece of fabric. So buying a fat quarter just makes more sense. And honestly, some of it's really cute. One of the fabrics people loved in my tech organizer actually came from Walmart. So for me, this is my go-to when I want something simpler, affordable, or even in a smaller quantity, because not every project needs high-end fabric. And similarly, there's the Dollar Tree. This one is definitely a specific use kind of option. Obviously, it's the Dollar Tree. You're not getting premium fabric, but you can get fat quarters for $1.25, and sometimes they have really cute prints. And for certain projects, that's all you need. I use a lot of small pieces for things like accessories, and sometimes I'm even laminating the fabric, so it doesn't need to be high-end to work well. In fact, people love the retro camper print that I use in my organizer tote bag. I've gotten so many comments on it, and it actually came from the Dollar Tree. And because I laminated it anyway, the fabric itself didn't need to be premium. It also helped me keep the cost of the bag low, especially while using things like iron-on vinyl and stabilizer. It's also a great option for practice if you're learning or trying something new. So this isn't somewhere I'd go for everything, but for small projects, practice, or just something fun and adorable, it can actually be really useful. And the last one I want to mention is actually local fabric stores. For me, that's Fabric Hut here in Norfolk, Virginia. If you're anywhere nearby, it's definitely worth checking out. It's a true fabric store with a nice range of fabrics, trims, and sewing supplies. And it's just a great place to browse in person. And I think that's something a lot of people miss now, being able to actually go somewhere and see and feel the fabric before you buy it. So if you have a local fabric store near you, I would absolutely encourage you to check it out. There are a lot of hidden gems out there that sometimes people forget to check. Fabric Hut is a great example of that for me. It has a good range of prices, solid quality, and it's just a really nice in-person experience. They do have an online store as well, and it's improved a lot. It's not quite at the same level as a larger online retailer like Mood, but it's still a solid option if you're not local. So this is my kind of insert your local store here category. If you have one nearby, it can really be a great resource. Now, there are a few places that I haven't personally used yet, but I might consider at some point in the future, depending on what I need. So the first one is the Fabric Depot. Now, unlike the next one, this is a very budget-friendly option. They have things like sale fabrics, clearance, bundles, and remnants. And you can usually buy as little as half a yard, which makes it a lot more flexible. So compared to somewhere like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, this just feels a little bit more intentional. You're going in looking for specific deals rather than just browsing a general craft store. And they also have a wider range of fabric types. Everything from quilting cotton to apparel to home decor. So you have more variety at that lower price point. So if I want something more affordable, but with a broader selection than my usual budget option, this is something I might consider trying, especially for things like stash building or finding something more specific without necessarily going premium. Next is Fabric and Fabrics, and this one is definitely on the high-end luxury side. They do have a store in New York, but it's by appointment only. So for most people, this is really an online experience. And honestly, every time I go to their website, I start drooling. The fabrics are gorgeous. Like every scroll is, ooh, that's pretty. I want that one. They're really well curated, the photos are beautiful, and you can get a great sense of texture and drape. So it's a really nice experience to browse. But realistically, for the kinds of projects I make, this isn't something I'd use on a regular basis. It's definitely more of a luxury option and more of an investment, especially with things like higher minimums on certain fabrics. But I still think it's a great option to know about, especially if you're looking for something really unique or statement making. So this is one of those stores that's not the most practical for me, so I'm unlikely to shop there anytime soon. But I definitely enjoy looking and kind of wish I could shop there because man, they're beautiful fabrics. Next is the online fabric store, and this one just feels like a really solid, approachable option. It's easy to navigate, easy to search by fabric type, and they even have sections specifically for things like craft fabrics, which is especially relevant for what I make. They've got a wide range, including novelty prints, which I know a lot of people are looking for. And while the photos are a little bit more straightforward, if you know what I mean, they do include video previews on a lot of fabrics, which helps give you a better sense of how they actually look and move. Price-wise, it's pretty affordable overall, and they have a clearance section. So it's another good option if you're trying to stay in that budget to mid-range. So this is another one that I haven't personally ordered from yet, but it is one that I'd consider, especially if I wanted something easy to browse with a wider selection. And I've got just one more before we get to the fabric resource I was telling you about that puts all this together. The last one is So Snip, and this one's a little bit more personal for me. I actually found it through social media, and I started following the journey of the owner, Blake, and I just really connected with the vision behind it, especially his transition from corporate to a creative business. It's definitely that kind of creator-led shop where you can tell there's a lot of intention behind the fabric selection, balancing distinctive prints with things that are still really usable. And that's something I really appreciate, especially as someone who also creates. The store itself is based in Virginia, so it's something I actually could visit in person, but it's also set up to be accessible online. And he has a very specific vision for sharing fabric online, which I think is really important. And honestly, while the online experience isn't quite to the level of some larger online retailers, it's accessible, organized, and it's clear that a lot of effort is going into building something strong there. I expect it to continue expanding as the business grows. So for me, this is not one I'd consider just because of the fabric, but because it's a business and a vision I want to support. And I think that's a really cool option to have. Now the resource I mentioned. This is a full list of every fabric store I'm currently aware of, including online shops and a lot of local places people have shared with me. It's organized, easy to reference, and you can grab it for free below if you want something you can come back to anytime. And if you want a deeper breakdown of your options, I'd recommend starting with my video on buying fabric online. It'll make that process a lot easier. And I've also linked the full playlist with all of my fabric resources. And that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!